The coffee shop was quiet that morning, filled with the smell of roasted beans and the soft sound of music playing in the background. Yet the silence broke when the door opened, and a young woman walked in carrying a small bag and a tired smile. Her name was Emily. She worked nearby and came here almost every morning before her shift. She was gentle, polite, and always kept to herself. Her arms were covered by a loose white shirt, but as she reached for her wallet, the sleeve slipped up, revealing part of a tattoo on her forearm, a dark eagle with numbers written below it. A few customers turned their heads to look at it, some with curiosity, others with confusion. At the corner table sat a group of off-duty soldiers dressed in casual clothes, but still carrying the air of pride and discipline that comes from wearing a uniform. One of them noticed Emily's tattoo and smirked. He leaned toward his friend, whispering loud enough for others to hear. "Look at that," trying to look tough with. "That military ink." Another soldier chuckled. "Yeah, right, I bet she just copied it from some movie or poster." Their laughter grew louder, echoing across the small cafe. Emily heard it. She tried to ignore it, her fingers trembling slightly as she paid for her coffee, but their voices pierced through her silence. The tallest soldier, a man with short blonde hair and a loud voice, leaned back in his chair and said, "Hey, miss, what's that tattoo mean? You a soldier or something?" His tone was mocking. The others laughed again. One even pulled up his own sleeve, showing a real Marine tattoo, and said, "See, this is what a real one looks like, not that fake drawing you got." The barista behind the counter frowned but said nothing. The other customers kept their heads down, pretending not to see what was happening. Emily took her cup and moved to a table near the window. Her heart pounding. She didn't like attention, especially not this kind. Her father had always told her to stay calm, to never let people like this shake her. Still, the laughter continued. One of the men said, "Maybe she got that tattoo to impress someone. Maybe she thinks people will believe she's tough," another added, "or maybe she's just trying to get attention from soldiers like us." Emily bit her lip. She wanted to stand up to them, but her voice refused to come out. The tattoo wasn't for attention. It wasn't fake. And it wasn't something she got for style. It was a memory, a promise, a piece of someone she had lost forever. She stared out the window, trying to block their words, but the memories began to surface. Her father's face, his smile, his strong arms lifting her when she was little, his voice saying, "Remember, Em, courage is not loud. It's quiet and steady, like your heart." She could still see him in his uniform before he left for his final mission. She was only 17 then. The laughter snapped her back to the present. One of the soldiers got up and walked closer, pretending to look at her tattoo. He said, "Come on, tell us where you got it done. Maybe we'll get matching ones." His friends laughed even harder. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She lowered her head, hoping they'd stop. The barista finally spoke up. "All right, guys, that's enough. You've had your fun, leave her alone." But the blonde soldier just grinned. "Relax, we're just joking around. No harm done, right, miss?" he said mockingly. Emily said nothing. A man sitting near the door put down his newspaper and looked up, his eyes calm, but sharp. He had been silent the whole time, just watching the scene. He was older, with gray hair and a strong posture, even in his plain clothes. There was something about him that demanded respect. Emily noticed him for a brief moment. Their eyes met and she quickly looked away. She didn't want anyone's pity. She just wanted peace, but the man kept watching, his gaze steady on the soldiers, as if waiting for the right moment to speak. The blonde soldier turned back to his friends, saying loud, enough for everyone to hear, "Imagine thinking a tattoo makes you brave." They all laughed again, but before the sound could echo too long, the door opened, and a gust of wind swept through the cafe, carrying with it the heavy steps of someone wearing boots. Everyone turned to see who had entered, and the laughter slowly faded, replaced by silence. A tall figure stood at the entrance, the light from outside casting a shadow across his face. The man was wearing a Marine uniform, his chest covered with badges and medals that gleamed under the soft cafe light. His expression was calm but firm. Every step he took echoed against the floor. The mocking soldiers froze for a moment. They recognized the rank on his shoulder, a high one, higher than any of them could claim. The colonel nodded politely to the barista. then glanced around the room, his eyes landing on Emily sitting quietly by the window. The air in the cafe grew heavy. No one spoke. No one dared. The Colonel's eyes moved from Emily's face to her tattoo, and something in his expression changed, a flicker of recognition, a flash of emotion that only someone who knew its meaning would understand. He walked toward her slowly, his boots striking the floor with purpose, every step making the mocking soldiers shrink a little lower in their seats. Emily looked up, confused, unsure why a Marine colonel was walking straight toward her. The colonel stopped beside her table, his voice deep yet gentle. "Excuse me, miss," he said. "Where did you get that tattoo?" The cafe went completely silent, every eye on them, every breath held as Emily looked up at him, her heart racing. She had no idea that this moment would change everything. The room fell into a deep silence as the Marine colonel stood beside Emily, his uniform crisp, his shoulders broad, his eyes calm yet sharp. Every movement he made carried quiet authority, and everyone in the cafe could feel it. The soldiers who had been laughing now sat frozen, unsure what to do or say. Emily looked up, her eyes wide and uncertain. She felt small under his gaze, but there was something gentle in his face, something that told her he was not there to judge her. Still, her voice trembled when she said softly, "I got it from my father, sir. He gave it to me before he left for duty." The colonel's jaw tightened slightly. He stared at the tattoo again, tracing the numbers in his mind as if they were familiar. His hand twitched slightly near his side. He took a slow breath, then asked quietly, "What was your father's name?" Emily hesitated for a second, unsure why he wanted to know. Then she whispered his name, "Sergeant Daniel Cross." The colonel blinked once, then twice. The sound of the name seemed to strike something deep within him. The cafe stayed silent. The soldiers looked at one another, confused, but the colonel's face changed. The calm expression faded into one of disbelief and heavy emotion. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her, his hands clasped together as if holding something invisible. "You said Daniel Cross?" he asked again, his voice low and serious. "Yes, sir," she replied, her fingers gripping her coffee cup. "He was my dad. He served in the Marines." The colonel nodded slowly, his eyes staring into the distance like he was remembering something far away, something that still haunted him. "He said your father was not just a Marine. He was a hero." Emily blinked, unsure if she had heard right. The colonel continued, his voice softer now. "I knew him. I served under him. Once, a long time ago, we were in the same unit. He saved many lives, including mine." One of the soldiers at the corner spoke up nervously. "Wait, sir, you knew her dad?" The colonel turned his head slightly, his sharp gaze cutting through the man like a blade. The soldier immediately lowered his head, his earlier arrogance gone, replaced by shame. The colonel looked back at Emily, his expression heavy with respect. "I remember that tattoo. He said it was his idea. He told us that courage is not about medals or ranks, it's about doing the right thing even when no one is watching." Emily's eyes began to glisten with tears. She whispered, "He told me the same thing before he left for his last mission. He said if I ever felt scared, I should look at this tattoo and remember that I come from strength." The colonel nodded, and his voice broke a little when he spoke again. "Your father was the reason I am alive today. We were ambushed during a mission. He pulled me out when everyone thought I was gone. He didn't make it back, but I did, and I have carried that guilt for years." A hush fell over the cafe. Even the coffee machine stopped making noise, as if it too was listening. The soldiers sat quietly, staring at the table, ashamed of what they had said earlier. Emily's hands shook. She said softly, "I never knew what really happened. They just told us he was gone." But no one explained how. The colonel closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. His voice firm, but full of pain. "Was a brave man. He stayed behind to cover us. He fought until his last breath. I have never forgotten that day." The air felt heavy and still. The soldiers who had mocked her now felt the weight of their actions pressing on their chests. One of them whispered under his breath, "I didn't know, I swear I didn't know." The colonel heard him but said nothing. He only looked at Emily again and asked, "Do you mind if I sit here for a while?" She nodded, unable to speak, her throat tight with emotion. He sat quietly for a few moments, then said, "You should be proud of that. Tattoo, it's not just ink, it's a story written in courage." Emily looked at him, and for the first time since her father's death, she felt something warm like light returning after a long night. She whispered, "Thank you, sir. I thought people would never understand what it means." The colonel gave a faint smile. "Trust me, miss, anyone who truly serves understands that mark better than anyone. It speaks without words." The door opened again and the cold air rushed in. But no one moved. Everyone was. Still caught in the moment, the soldiers who had laughed before stood up, their faces pale. They walked over slowly, and one of them said quietly, "Ma'am, I am sorry for what we said. We were wrong. We didn't know." Emily nodded, her voice soft. "It's all right, you didn't know, but now you do." The colonel turned his gaze toward them, his tone calm but powerful. "You see, men, respect is not about strength or loud voices. It's about honor. You mocked something sacred without knowing the story behind it. Remember that next time before you speak." The soldiers nodded, ashamed and silent. The colonel stood, his tall frame casting a shadow across the table. His eyes once again on Emily, he said, "I owe your father everything. I can never repay that debt, but I can honor him by respecting his legacy, and you are part of that legacy." Emily's lips trembled as she whispered, "Thank you, Colonel." Her heart pounding. Not from fear this time, but from pride. He gave a short nod, then glanced once more at her tattoo before turning toward the exit. His voice calm, yet heavy with meaning. "I'll be back tomorrow, miss. There's something you should see." And as he walked out the cafe, no one dared to move or speak. Not even for a moment. The next morning, the sun rose quietly above the sleepy town, the sky painted with soft colors of gold and pink. Emily woke early, her mind still heavy with what had happened at the cafe the night before. She could not forget the colonel's words or the look in his eyes when he mentioned her father. It felt as if the past she had buried for years was suddenly knocking at her door again. She dressed slowly, putting on her favorite white shirt, the same one that had slipped up and revealed her tattoo yesterday. She looked at the mark on her arm, tracing the edges with her finger. The ink had faded a little over time, but its meaning never had. She whispered softly to herself, "You would be proud of him, Dad. He remembered you." Her small apartment was filled with pictures of her father. Most of them in uniform, some smiling, some serious, and one taken just days before his final mission. She picked up that photo and smiled through the ache in her chest. The sound of his laugh still echoed in her mind like a song she could never forget. At exactly 9 o'clock, she arrived at the same cafe, hoping the colonel had not been just a passing stranger. To her surprise, he was already there, sitting at the same table from yesterday, his uniform perfect, his posture straight, his coffee untouched. He looked up the moment she walked in and gave a small nod as if he had been waiting. Emily walked over shyly, unsure what to say before she could speak. He gestured for her to sit. "Please have a seat, Miss Cross," he said. In his calm, deep voice, "I have something for you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver tag hanging from a chain. The light from the window reflected off it. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She knew that tag. She had seen it once, before in her childhood when her father used to wear it around his neck. She gasped, whispering, "That's my father's dog tag. How do you have this?" The colonel's eyes softened. "I kept it all these years. He said he gave it to me before that final mission, told me to send it home if he didn't make it back. I tried to, but the communication line was cut off. Then I got transferred overseas, and when I returned, your family had moved. I never stopped looking for you." Tears welled in Emily's eyes, her voice shaking. "You kept it all this time," he nodded. "I owed him that and more. He saved me that day and 3 others. He was the bravest man I ever met." The cafe was quiet again. Just like before, the few customers nearby tried not to stare, but their ears listened carefully. Emily held the tag in her trembling hands, the metal cold against her skin. She could almost feel her father's touch through it. The colonel leaned forward, his voice low and thoughtful. "There's something else you should know about that tattoo you wear. It's not just your father's design, it was the symbol of our secret unit. The Eagle Division, we carried that mark under our sleeves. It meant loyalty, courage, and sacrifice. Your father designed it himself after our first mission together. Emily's mouth fell open. She looked down at her arm in shock. All this time I thought it was just for me, she said quietly. He smiled. It was for all of us, but especially for you. He always said, if something ever happened, to him you would carry his strength through that mark, and now you do. The group of soldiers from the day before entered the cafe at that very moment, their heads low, their faces serious. They spotted the colonel and immediately stood at attention. Sir, they said quietly. The colonel turned to them, his expression unreadable. At ease, men, he said, and then he gestured toward Emily. Do you remember this young lady, the one you mocked yesterday? They nodded, shame in their eyes. Yes, sir. One of them whispered. The colonel's voice grew firm yet controlled. Her father was Sergeant Daniel Cross, a Marine who gave his life so that others could live. You mocked his memory without knowing it. And that is why I brought you here today, so you could learn the meaning of respect. The soldiers lowered their heads in silence. One of them, a young man with brown hair, said softly, We are sorry, ma'am. We didn't know who you were. Emily looked at them and smiled gently, her tears still shining in her eyes. It's all right, she said. Now you do just remember that every mark has a story, and sometimes that story belongs to a hero. The colonel nodded, proud of her composure. Then he stood and faced the soldiers again. When you wear the uniform, remember that. You carry not just your name, but the names of those who came before you. Every symbol, every scar, every tattoo tells a story of someone who gave more than words can measure. The soldiers stood quietly, taking in every word, the weight of his voice. Settling deep inside their hearts, Emily turned back to the colonel, her voice soft but steady. Thank you for bringing me this, she said. I feel like I've found a missing piece of him. He nodded, then smiled. For the first time since they met your father. Would be proud, Miss Cross, very proud, he said. She looked at the tag again, holding it close to her heart. The sunlight touched it, making it shine like something alive. And for a brief second she felt as if her father was right there watching over her, his presence warm and real. The colonel took a slow breath and said, There's still more you should know. Miss Cross, meet me tomorrow at the Memorial Park at 10 o'clock. There's something you need to see. Something your father left behind. Emily nodded, her heart racing, curiosity and fear mixing together. She didn't know what waited for her, but she knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. The morning air was cool and gentle when Emily walked toward the Memorial Park, her steps slow, her heart racing inside her chest. The city was still quiet, the trees around the park swaying softly in the breeze. She clutched her father's dog tag tightly between her fingers, afraid to lose even a moment of what it meant. The words, the colonel had spoken yesterday, echoed in her mind. Something you need to see. Something your father left behind. As she reached the gate, she saw him standing there, tall and strong, the same Marine colonel who had changed everything just days ago. He was not in uniform this time. He wore a simple jacket. But even then he carried the same quiet power that drew every eye when he entered a room. He nodded once. As she approached, Morning, Miss Cross, he said in his deep, calm voice. You came just on time. She smiled politely. Good morning, Colonel. I didn't want to be late. He looked at her with a small smile and said, Your father was never late either. Come, I want to show you something. They walked down a narrow path lined with flags, each one moving gently in the wind as they passed by. Emily's eyes caught the names engraved on the large stone wall ahead, each name belonging to a Marine who had given everything for others. She felt a lump in her throat as she whispered softly, It's beautiful. Here, he nodded. Yes, it is. This is where courage lives on. They stopped near the end of the wall where a few fresh flowers rested by a small plaque. The colonel knelt down, brushing away a few fallen leaves. He pointed at the plaque and said, Look here, this is his name. Emily knelt beside him, her eyes filling with tears as she read the words, Sergeant Daniel Cross, United States Marine Corps. Brave father and hero. She reached out and touched the carved letters, tracing them slowly with her trembling hand. She whispered, I've missed you, Dad. The colonel stood quietly behind her, giving her space. his eyes filled with emotion as if he too was remembering the man who once saved his life. After a long pause, the colonel spoke softly. "Your father left something behind for you, something he gave me to keep safe." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small folded envelope, yellowed by time and carefully sealed. He held it out to her, saying, "He wrote this letter before our last mission. He asked me to give it to you if he didn't come back." Emily stared at it, afraid to open it, afraid of what it might say, but with shaking hands she slowly unsealed it and began to read. "My dearest Emily, if you are reading this, it means I could not come home. I want you to know that you were the best part of my life. You gave me courage every day to face what was ahead. This tattoo we share is not just a mark. It is a promise that no matter what happens, you will never be alone. It means strength, honor, and love. Keep it close and live bravely. My little girl." Tears streamed down her cheeks, the paper trembling in her hands. The colonel looked away, his own eyes glistening with memories. He said quietly, "I have carried that letter for years, waiting for the day I could finally keep my promise to him." Emily folded the letter carefully and held it close to her heart. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for keeping this for me." The colonel nodded. "No, Miss Cross, thank you for reminding me what honor means." They stood together in silence, the wind moving gently through the trees, carrying the faint sound of the flag fluttering above them. After a few moments, Emily looked up at him and said, "You mentioned something about the tattoo before you said it was more than a symbol." He nodded. "Yes, and you deserve to know the truth." He slowly removed his jacket, revealing his shoulder underneath the sleeve was rolled up to show the same tattoo as hers, the eagle and the numbers carved into his skin. The sight made Emily gasp. She covered her mouth in shock. "You have it too," she whispered. He nodded. "This was our oath. The Eagle Division, your father designed it to remind us that courage has wings." He turned toward the memorial wall and said, "Every man in that unit carried this mark hidden under their uniforms. It meant we would never abandon each other no matter what. And your father, he lived that promise until the very end." The soldiers from before appeared in the distance, walking slowly toward them. They had heard about the visit and wanted to come. They stopped a few feet away and saluted quietly. One of them stepped forward carrying a small wooden box wrapped in the Marine flag. The colonel took it from him and handed it to Emily, saying, "This belonged to your father. It was recovered after the mission. I never opened it because it was meant for you." Emily carefully lifted the lid. Inside was a simple photo of her and her father together when she was little. Her tiny hand holding his finger. Next to it was a silver pin shaped like an eagle. She picked it up and smiled through her tears. "He kept this all along," she whispered. The colonel's voice was steady, but warm. "Your father wanted you to know that bravery runs in your blood, not in your rank," he said softly. The soldiers stood silently, watching the moment with respect, as the flag above them waved proudly under the sun. Emily placed the letter and the tag inside the box again. Closing it gently, she said, "Thank you for everything, Colonel." Her voice calm but full of strength. He nodded, then placed a hand over his heart, saying, "Your father may be gone, but his spirit lives on through you. Never forget that." As they turned to leave, the sunlight shone brighter across the park, and the eagle engraved on the wall seemed almost alive. Wings stretched as if ready to fly. The next day came with the sound of rain falling softly against the windows. The sky was gray and the air smelled of wet earth. Emily sat at her kitchen table holding the wooden box the colonel had given her. She ran her fingers over the eagle pin inside, thinking about everything that had happened since that day in the cafe. It all felt like a dream, yet every moment felt too real to forget. She looked at her tattoo, the same mark that had once brought her shame, now shining with pride. She whispered quietly, "I understand now, Dad." There was a knock at the door. Her heart jumped. She opened it and saw the colonel standing there, his jacket soaked from the rain, but his expression calm as always. He said softly, "Morning, Miss Cross. Sorry for coming unannounced. I just wanted to see how you're doing." She smiled, a little. "I'm fine, sir. Thank you for everything you've done." He shook his head. "You don't need to thank me. I owed your father, and meeting you reminded me that some debts are paid, not with words but with actions." He stepped inside the small apartment, looking around at the framed photos on the wall. His eyes landed on one showing her father in uniform, smiling beside a younger Emily. He said quietly, "He talked about you often. You were his reason to come home." Emily felt a lump in her throat again. She asked in a small voice, "Colonel, what really happened that day in the mission? No one ever told me everything." He paused, looking out the window for a long moment before answering, his voice low and steady. "It was chaos. Miss Cross, we were deep in enemy territory and the ambush came fast. Your father was leading the rear. He could have escaped, but he stayed to cover us. I can still hear his voice shouting, 'Go. I'll hold them off.' He saved my life that day and the lives of 3 others. He never once hesitated." Emily listened, tears running down her cheeks. The colonel turned back to her, his eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and pride. He said, "I still hear him sometimes when I close my eyes, reminding me to keep moving forward. That is why when I saw your tattoo, I couldn't stay silent. I knew it was his." For a moment neither spoke. The rain outside filled the silence between them, the sound soft and endless. The colonel then took a deep breath and said, "Miss Cross, there's something I haven't told you yet. Your father's bravery inspired more than just me after his death. We started an annual ceremony for fallen soldiers every year. We honor one Marine whose courage lives on. Tomorrow is that day, and I would like you to come." Emily nodded, without hesitation. "Yes, I will come," she said. Her voice strong but trembling inside. She felt nervous and proud all at once. The next morning the rain had stopped, the sky bright and clear. The memorial park was filled with soldiers, officers, and families. Gathered around the flagpole, the wind carried the sound of soft music playing in the distance. Emily walked beside the colonel, her head held high, her father's dog tag around her neck and the eagle pin on her shirt. She had never felt so close to him before. When they reached the stage, the colonel turned to her and said, "Today we remember heroes, but some stories deserve to be told not by officers or medals, but by family. If you are willing, Miss Cross, would you like to speak for your father?" She froze for a moment, her heart racing. "Me?" she asked in disbelief. He nodded gently. "Yes, you. His courage lives through you." Emily took a deep breath and stepped up to the microphone. The crowd quieted. The wind stopped. Even the birds seemed to listen. She looked around, seeing so many uniforms shining under the sunlight. She began to speak, her voice shaking. "At first, my father was Sergeant Daniel Cross, a Marine, a hero. But to me, he was simply Dad. He taught me to be brave, not by fighting battles, but by facing life with courage even when it hurts. He told me courage is not loud. It is quiet and steady, like the beating of your heart." The crowd listened in silence, many with tears in their eyes. She lifted her arm, showing her tattoo he gave me. This mark, before his last mission. He said it was our bond, our promise, and for years I hid it because I thought people wouldn't understand. But now I know it's more than ink. It's a memory. It's a story of love and sacrifice. The colonel stood in the crowd, his eyes glistening with pride. Emily looked at him and smiled, then said softly to everyone here, "Remember, when you see a mark or a scar on someone, don't judge it too quickly. You never know what story it carries." When she finished, the crowd stood in silence. No one clapped at first because it felt too sacred. Then slowly, one by one, soldiers began to salute. The colonel stepped forward, his boots clicking against the ground. He removed his jacket, revealing his tattoo, the same eagle with the same numbers. The crowd gasped. Emily covered her mouth in shock, tears streaming down her face. The colonel turned to the soldiers and said, "This mark is not about me. It is about him. Sergeant Cross, his courage, his loyalty, his sacrifice, and his daughter, who carries his spirit today." The crowd remained silent. Heads bowed, the flag above them waved gently in the wind. The moment stretched long and deep, filled with respect and quiet emotion. Emily looked up at the sky, whispering, "I hope. You see this, Dad, they know now, they finally know." The colonel placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice soft and steady. He would be proud. Miss Cross very proud. And as the ceremony ended, the silence in the air felt like more than stillness. It felt like honor. "Would you like me to write part 6 next?" The powerful emotional ending that will leave your viewers speechless. Exactly 800 words, no full stops, simple English, and full of meaning and suspense. The sun began to set behind the tall trees, casting a golden light over the memorial park. The wind was soft and warm, and the sound of the flag waving above echoed gently through the air. The ceremony had ended, but no one wanted to leave. People stood quietly around the stage, still moved. By Emily's words, her voice, her courage, her love for her father had touched something deep in every heart. Emily stood near the flagpole, holding the wooden box close to her chest. She felt peace inside, something she had not felt in years. The pain of losing her father was still there, but now it was different. It no longer felt heavy or cold, it felt like strength. She looked at her tattoo, the small eagle shining under the soft evening light, and whispered, "Thank you, Dad." The colonel walked up. Beside her, his footsteps slow, his face calm but proud, he said softly, "You did well, Miss Cross. Your father would have been proud of every word you spoke." She smiled through tears. "Thank you, Colonel. I was scared at first, but when I spoke I felt like he was standing right beside me." The colonel nodded quietly. Maybe he was. The soldiers who had mocked her that day in the cafe approached slowly, heads bowed, faces filled with regret. One of them, the blonde one who had started the teasing, took a deep breath and said, "Ma'am, I wanted to say we are truly sorry for what we did. We were foolish and disrespectful. We didn't understand the meaning behind your tattoo, and we had no right to judge you." Emily looked at them, her expression kind and calm. "It's all right," she said. "Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is that you learned from it." The blonde soldier nodded, his eyes watery with emotion. "We did, ma'am, more than you know." The colonel turned to them, his voice deep but steady. "Men, respect is not given by rank or power. It is earned by understanding and compassion. Remember this day, because this is what honor truly means." They all nodded, their eyes fixed on him as if his words were carved in stone. A light breeze passed, carrying the scent of flowers from the memorial garden nearby. The colonel looked up at the sky and said softly, "Your father's legacy lives through every one of us. He taught me courage through his actions, and you have reminded me that his spirit continues through you. Miss Cross." Emily held the dog tag hanging from her neck, the same one that had once belonged to her father, and said quietly, "I used to think I was weak without him, but now I know that he never really left. He's still here in every heartbeat, in every memory, and in every act of kindness." The colonel smiled for the first time, a full warm smile that softened his strong face. He said, "There is something I would like to show you before we leave, Miss Cross." She followed him as he walked toward a small corner of the park, where a new plaque had been placed, covered with a folded Marine flag. He nodded to one of the officers nearby, who carefully lifted the flag away, revealing the words beneath. It read, "In honor of Sergeant Daniel Cross, whose courage continues to guide those who serve." Beneath it was engraved, "Designed by his daughter Emily Cross in memory of his sacrifice." Emily gasped, her hands covering her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. She turned to the colonel, who said, "We wanted this to be permanent. Your story reminded us that every hero leaves behind more than medals. They leave behind love and inspiration. Your words today moved everyone, including me. So we thought this would be the best way to honor him and you." Emily could not speak. She placed her hand on the plaque, her fingers trembling. Tracing her father's name and her own side by side, she whispered, "Thank you, Dad. This is your place forever." The colonel stood beside her silently, his eyes reflecting the glow of the setting sun. The soldiers behind them saluted quietly, holding their positions until the wind settled. As the crowd slowly began to leave, the colonel and Emily remained by the plaque. Neither wanted to move. The world felt still and peaceful, like everything had finally come full circle. She turned to him and said softly, "Colonel, can I ask you something?" He nodded. "Of course, Miss Cross." She hesitated, then asked, "What do you think my father would say if he were here right now?" The colonel looked at her for a long moment, his eyes full of understanding and warmth, then said he would say, "I'm proud of you, kid. You carried my strength when I couldn't. You turned pain into purpose, and that is what true courage looks like." Emily smiled, tears glistening on her cheeks. She whispered, "Then, I'll keep carrying it for him always." The colonel saluted her not as a superior but as a sign of respect and honor. She hesitated for a second, then raised her hand and saluted back the soldiers. Nearby watched in silence, their hearts full of admiration. The sun dipped, lower painting the sky in colors of fire and gold. The light touched both of them as they stood there side by side. After a long pause, the colonel said softly, "Remember, Miss Cross, courage does not fade and neither does love every time you look at that tattoo. Remember, it carries not just ink but a story that will live forever." She nodded quietly. "I will, Sir Ace." They walked away from the memorial. The wind grew stronger, the flag above them waving proudly in the evening light, and for one brief moment Emily could almost hear her father's voice carried by the breeze, gentle and sure, saying, "I'm here, Emily, always here." And with that, the story that began with laughter and mockery ended with silence and respect, a silence so powerful that everyone who had witnessed it would remember it for the rest of their lives.